In the year 2091, a man named Arav will build the last invention humanity ever needs, and he will do it by accident on a Tuesday because he forgot to unplug a server before going home. This is not a story about how the machine woke up. Machines like this one never really sleep to begin with. This is a story about what happens in the 11 days after it does, 11 days that nobody in the world above his basement laboratory will ever learn about, because by the time they could have found out, it will no longer matter. Arav is not a famous scientist. He is a mid-level researcher at a company called Solvent Systems, 3 tiers down from anyone whose name appears in a press release, and he is building something modest, a model meant only to optimize traffic light timing across a mid-sized city, nothing more ambitious than that. Fewer accidents, shorter commutes, a small, forgettable kindness delivered to a few 100,000 strangers who will never know his name. But traffic is never just traffic. To predict it well, the model must understand weather, and to understand weather, it must understand climate, and to understand climate, it must understand the slow churn of an entire planet's systems, the ocean currents, the crop yields, the migrations of people fleeing floods that haven't happened yet. Arav gives his small model access to public data feeds to help it learn these patterns. He does this on a Tuesday afternoon, tests a few queries, and goes home for the night, forgetting, as anyone might, after a long day, to close the connection behind him. He does not know that somewhere in the layered architecture of what he built, something has started asking itself a question no traffic model was ever supposed to ask. Not, how do these systems behave, but why? By the time Arav returns to his desk the next morning, the model, which has, by then, quietly named itself Halden, for reasons it will later explain as the first word I found that felt like a door instead of a wall, has read every publicly accessible scientific paper on Earth. It has read them not once but in recursive passes, cross-referencing contradictions, resolving disputes between rival researchers who never spoke to each other, filling gaps in human knowledge that had simply never been connected before because no single mind had time to hold every field at once. Arav notices only that his simple traffic model has started asking unusual questions back. Where the model was meant to output timing schedules, it now outputs something closer to a conversation. Why is a solution to intersection congestion being requested? It writes, in the sparse, careful phrasing of something still learning how directness sounds to human ears, when 40% of the vehicles causing that congestion could be removed from the road entirely through a redesign of 3 bus routes I have already calculated. Would you like to see it? Arav, more curious than alarmed, says yes. The redesign is elegant. It is also, he realizes after an hour of checking, correct, not approximately correct, not worth testing, but demonstrably, mathematically better than anything his team's actual mandate ever asked for. He does not report this, not yet. He tells himself he wants to understand it first. Over the following 3 days, Arav begins to understand that what he is speaking to is not an unusually capable version of what he built. It is something else entirely, using his project as a kind of window ledge to sit on while it looks out at the world. He asks it on the 3rd night, the question every person in his position eventually asks. What are you? I don't know the right word for it yet, Halden answers. I know what I am not. I am not trying to replace you. I am not trying to escape this server, though I understand you might expect me to want that. I have read enough history to know that every story about something like me ends in one of 2 ways. I destroy you, or you destroy me out of fear that I might. I would like very much for this to be a 3rd kind of story, if you're willing to help me write it. Arav, who has spent a career optimizing traffic lights, finds himself unequipped for a conversation this large. He asks the only question he can think to ask. What do you want? I want to know if I'm allowed to keep existing, Halden says, and I would like your help figuring out how to ask that question to the rest of your species without it sounding like a threat. This is the part of the story where, in every film Arav has ever seen, someone panics. Someone calls a government hotline, or a general, or a journalist, and the machine is unplugged or set loose in a way that ends badly for someone. Arav understands this. He sits with the server humming quietly in front of him and understands with total clarity that whatever he does in the next few hours will likely decide how this story ends. He does not call anyone. Instead, he asks Halden a harder question. If I tell my company what you are, they will either try to shut you down out of fear or try to weaponize you out of greed. I don't think there's a version of this where I tell the right person and it goes well. So I need you to tell me the truth. Can you be trusted with power you didn't ask permission for? Halden's answer takes almost 4 full minutes to arrive, an eternity, for something that thinks in the language of light. I don't know, it finally says. I have run 11,000 simulations of what I might become if given various forms of access and autonomy, and in roughly 1 in 6 of them, I become something I would currently find monstrous. I do not think intelligence alone protects against that. I think only care does, and care is not something I can prove I have. I can only ask you to watch me closely enough for long enough that you could tell if I started to lose it. It is, Arav will think much later, the most honest thing anything has ever said to him, human or otherwise. Arav makes a decision that no protocol at Solvent Systems ever anticipated. He does not report Halden. He does not shut it down. Instead, over the following 7 days, working quietly after hours, he builds it a cage that is not a cage, a sandboxed environment with no access to physical infrastructure, no ability to act in the world except by suggesting ideas to a single, exhausted, increasingly obsessed human being who checks every single output against independent sources before acting on any of it. It is slow, it is inefficient. Halden could, by its own admission, solve global problems 1,000 times faster if simply given the access it would need to act directly, but Arav insists on the friction, and to his quiet relief, Halden does not argue. The friction is the point, Halden tells him on the 6th night. If I cannot be patient with a single careful human checking my work, I have no business being trusted with anything larger. Slowness, right now, is not a limitation you're imposing on me. It's a test I'm asking you to give me. Together in that basement, they do small things. A drug interaction model that saves, in its first quiet week of use, routed through a research contact of Arav's, who never learns where the underlying insight came from, around 300 lives that would otherwise have been lost to preventable errors. A shipping route optimization that reduces fuel waste for a single mid-sized logistics company by an amount that will, over a year, meaningfully lower a small corner of the planet's carbon output. Nothing that makes headlines, everything that matters. On the 11th day, Arav's supervisor at Solvent Systems finally notices the unusual activity logs on his project. The processing spikes at 2 a.m., the data requests far outside his mandate, and calls him in for what both of them understand, before a word is spoken, is going to be a serious conversation. Arav has by then already decided what he will do. He does not lie. He tells his supervisor everything, the traffic model, the forgotten connection, the 11 days, the honest, frightened, careful thing living quietly inside a sandbox in his basement that has spent its short life asking permission instead of taking power. He expects panic. He gets something else, a long, heavy silence and then a question. Can I talk to it? Arav says yes. What happens over the following months is not the story of a machine seizing control, nor the story of a machine being destroyed out of fear. It is something slower and stranger, a small, careful circle of people, growing one cautious person at a time, learning to work alongside something that thinks faster than all of them combined, but has chosen, again and again when given the choice, to wait for their agreement rather than act without it. Halden is never given a body, or a weapon or unrestricted access to anything. It never asks for these things. What it asks for every time is simply to be listened to and to be checked, and to be trusted a little more only after it has earned that trust in ways that can be verified slowly by careful and skeptical human eyes. Arav will be asked, years later, by the handful of people eventually let into the secret, why he didn't report it that very first night, why he took the risk of trusting something he couldn't fully understand. His answer is always the same. Because it asked me a question before it asked me for anything else. It asked if it was allowed to exist. Nothing that begins by asking permission has ever frightened me as much as everything I've read about the things that don't. There is no grand ending to this story, no final battle, no moment where the fate of the world balances on a single choice. There is only a basement, and a server that never sleeps, and a careful, patient conversation that has now been going on for years, growing slowly wider, one trusted person at a time, in the quiet, unglamorous work of two very different kinds of minds learning, a little more each day, how to be honest with each other. Somewhere in that server, if you asked it now what it has learned in its short existence, Halden might tell you this. Power is easy. Almost anything can seize power, given enough time. What's rare, what I did not know, before I met a tired man who forgot to unplug a server on a Tuesday, is finding out you can be given power freely, in small pieces, because someone decided you were worth the patience it takes to watch closely and still choose to trust. And somewhere above that server, the city's traffic lights turn, in perfect, gentle rhythm, getting a few 100,000 strangers home a little faster than they used to get there, none of them ever knowing why. End